Okay, we are live all.
Got it.
It's a good right now if you want.
Cool. All right, we'll call this meeting of the City of Salem Legislative Committee to order for February 17th, 2023. Present are Hoy
Stapleton, Nordyke.
and staff to be identified as needed. All right. Justin, looks like you're up with updates and information sharing on the second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Good to see everybody, staff, who are awesome. I say it every time, but good to see everyone. I don't have a lot. We've been busy in the building doing a few things. Why I'm excited and in a really good mood today, not just because the casual dress, but we are 20% of the way done with the legislative session.
And 100% done with our visits to our local delegations.
That's correct. That's coming later, Mr. Mayor. That's coming later. So I'm excited about that. A couple of really key dates that I think we need to keep an eye on. February 22nd is kind of the first revenue forecast that we're going to see, and I'm sure Josh will be talking that thing next week. And then we've got the big one on May 17th. So, and why I say that one on the 17th is big is because that's really what sets the framework on getting out of the building. We're going to know our numbers, and then the race is on to see what happens, who gets funded, what the priorities are, and what we can get out of the legislative body itself. So I'm looking forward to that on the 17th. The mayor did mention these meetings. Excuse me. We met with every member of the Salem delegation. We met with Senator Patterson. We didn't meet with Senator Girard because he was out sick. We met with Senator Thatcher. We met with Representative Evans. We met with Representative Neal. We had a good discussion with Representative Mannix. We met with Representative Kramer, and we met with Representative Anderson, which was a good meeting as well. And we got a lot of things on the table. Those are important. And why I say those are important, not so much because people need to know our priorities, which we've shared with all of them. Those are important because it's really key to meet with legislators. Have these discussions early when you're not asking for stuff, right? Because we will be asking for stuff for sure. So meet and greets, good to meet the new city manager, good to meet the new mayor. And as we continue to dive down with folks, those just kind of set the stage for things to come. So I'm excited about that. We got that out of the way. Now we can really get on to the policy stuff, which is in everybody's packet today. And then, actually, let's just delve into that, Mr. Mayor. That's all I've got in terms of update.
Who's going to lead us on that? Are you, Courtney? Or do you want me to go through it?
Well, we have the first three are about housing. And so I think Lisa's here to represent Eunice. If you have any questions about the bill summaries, they're on the back page of your packet. We're talking about Senate Bill 847, which these are draft position statements. So you'll notice that there are some staff names and other things like that that would certainly be cleaned up before it went to the city council on the floor. But Senate Bill 847 is about new residential construction. Do you want to address that at all, Lisa?
The summary is 12 paragraphs long.
Yes.
The summary.
It's a ginormous bill. There's a reference to page 26 in the staff review of the bill that's on the back of your packet today. So it's a very, very large bill. I think we're just offering a support position and just keeping it at the staff level for the near term. Do you want to address any pieces of it?
Yeah, CD is hoping that there's some amendments. There's a section in there that would require us to allow housing and all in that allows commercial.
I saw
It
that.
doesn't say, oh, industrial land's exempt, and then it doesn't give density requirements. It has some strange language about applying the nearest residential zone as development standards, which doesn't really make any sense to us. OAPA and I think LOC are going to try to work to get some amendments to that. But the goal is that cities have mixed use land. I think it can be worded better. I'm not sure what the goal is of that section, but it seems like they're trying to require some cities to allow mixed use, which of course
We already do.
we do. So
The other concerning part of the language, and I want to know more about it, is where it wants to freeze the values. Like, okay, on what, all properties? That's because that, they're the state's really great about freezing property taxes, because it turns out property taxes don't fund state government, they fund city government and county government, so. It'd be like us trying to freeze the income tax, because it doesn't impact us in any way.
Yeah, it references certain residential units.
Right,
And then it
what?
speaks to also ADUs and middle housing that's being used as primary residences. So that was something that this is one of those weird bills where I think Eunice was looking at it from one perspective, Jessica was looking at it from another perspective, and I was looking at it from another perspective because it is 32 pages long. And they're layering so many things in one bill, it makes it really tricky.
It sounds like an administrative.
I think that, so in terms of for this meeting, unless there's other thoughts, it seems like we're not ready to take any sort of position because we don't yet kind of understand what the whole point of this thing is that, Justin, do you have thoughts on this bill?
No, I mean, other than who's gonna drive those amendments, if it's getting traction, if it's starting to move, is that us? Do we look to the league to do that? Do we look, I mean, that would be my only question.
And the interesting thing, I'm looking at the sponsor, Senator Drama, who is the chair of the, I believe, Senate Housing Committee, so that's a sign that this bill could go somewhere, so. I feel like we need to do some work on this bill.
And there's bipartisan support with Senator Anderson on there, who's a former mayor, so.
So we're supportive in general about bills that would allow us to meet our housing need.
Of course.
And so we could keep an eye on this and keep this conversation and dialogue with the legislative committee going and just wait. But certainly try to achieve the outcome of additional housing, more tools to
Sure.
support housing.
Do we take a proactive stance in trying to figure out what good amendments would be that would make us more comfortable? And then
Yeah.
trying to find folks who would be willing to champion those amendments? I think that would be a good proactive step, but I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like a good conversation with the League of Urban Cities, because they're gonna have a sort of a little bit broader perspective, like the housing person. I don't know who does housing over there.
It's one of the new people that
Okay.
we're
Yeah, maybe Courtney, if you could follow up with them and just see where they're at with this, that'd be great. And we can start next time.
Okay. Plus, I think from all of those perspectives that were just mentioned, with Eunice watching it, Sarah and Jessica watching it for different sides, they'll also have, your professional associations can offer some other
Yeah.
information. Okay, expediting housing is 2815.
Yeah, this bill would require the city to allow people to submit their building permits for like housing before their plat for their subdivisions done.
Yeah,
We allow people to submit now, but we don't do a full review. So like building safety does a structural review, but planning, public works, they don't review it because we don't know where the lot lines are ultimately going to end up. So we'd have to do the work twice. We don't want to charge them for 2 reviews. So we just thought we would oppose it because it seems like what they're wanting, although we're not saying it, is for us to review and approve the building permits before the plat is done, which is a huge risk for the builder, but also kind of a nightmare for us if they get it wrong with their survey.
I have a little bit of history with this bill because during the short session, we considered this concept. And I talked to the sponsor about her goal, and I know that it's more in the rural areas right now where they're trying to plot out new developments, and they're really having some big delays over in Central Oregon and things. I know that I guess my idea would be keep an eye on this for now. I'm not sure that it's gonna go anywhere.
I would agree with that, Mr. Mayor, in looking at the only action it is had is from business down to housing. It's Representative Morgan and Representative Wright. So I think your discussions with the sponsor and being within the caucus when that concept was being floated. I think you're probably right. And we'll keep an eye on it, but I don't know if it has much of a chance.
Yeah, and I'd rather not take a formal position on opposing it at this time. Just keep an eye on it. But if it does look like it develops legs, we'll certainly want to circle back.
3175, I think, is housing grants, and that was a late ad. Does anyone have backstory on that?
Oh, this is a rehash of a bill from the last session, from the short session. Yes, I know this bill. I actually was a co-sponsor of this bill. It basically is, the whole goal is to incentivize for more volunteer firefighters. Is that we're on 3175?
I thought it was a housing.
It's
grant.
74.
I think it's 74.
Oh,
okay.
I think we've got a title.
For volunteer firefighters. so look it up.
Perfect.
Because that's got 31, yeah, I mean, like we're in front of me.
We do have 3174 reviewed.
Okay.
Excellent.
It's like,
And
that's
that's
a 3175 and build track reviewing, because I looked this morning, I'm like, I don't know what this one is.
Yeah, they can cross it off on mine.
20 fingers. Okay, so this one,
So 3175.
yes, 3174
Okay.
is about offering a bunch of different kinds of grants for regional housing, and that is a summary that is in your packet. 3174 grants to LOC
Oh,
and
yes.
AOC.
This is a good bill in my mind. I'm not sure it has any chance, but I think it's a good concept.
And it's got bipartisan support,
Yeah.
Representative Hartman in the swing district and a new legislator from the
Yeah.
Oregon City area to Representative Meek's spot.
The bill says it would allow local governments to hire an additional 400 to 500 professional staff for planning. I mean, do we have any idea what percentage of that might come to Salem?
No, we were thinking it was gonna be paired with 2889, which would assign us housing units we have to build over, provide over a certain amount of time.
Mhm.
And then we weren't sure then if based on like the number of housing units Salem's assigned, if the money for the staff would. Like, be
It's too
related
soon to
that.
tell. I mean, overall, it sounds good.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So that's a support one.
Yeah.
We're good with that. Great. And then we're moving from housing to environmental justice and land use, which is 3217. That is on the back page of your packet.
So this would require statewide planning goal 1 to be amended to include environmental justice, so we support it. But it says that once statewide planning goal 1 is amended, the city would only have 90 days to amend our comp plan and. To
It's never
comply.
gonna happen.
I mean, we have to give DLT 35 days notice on any amendment, so that, I mean, there's not even time to have one hearing on a comp plan amendment, so.
This is a brand new representative who probably doesn't understand all those timelines,
Yeah.
so I would think that an amendment would be helpful.
Yeah.
Also, it would be good to know exactly what we mean by environmental justice practices, because that's a little bit vague.
Yes.
It's a great concept, but what does that mean in reality? So maybe that's one to talk to the league about as well, according to see if they're working on amendments.
Okay.
Interesting that nobody else signed on to this bill. It's kind of unusual. So I'm not worried about it.
We're following that practice of casting a wider net this year, so we'll catch things like this and
Yeah.
have these conversations and follow up with the league. The next thing is, Sarah, I think this is you, Senate Bill 683.
No, This is not,
Oh,
I kicked this one to Eunice,
sorry.
because the industrial thing, of course, we want to build, but it goes against comp plan stuff, so I kicked it to Eunice.
Perfect.
Yeah, this would allow the county to designate, to just pick land inside the UGB and say it's industrial. And
Inside the UGB?
yeah, yes, and then we would have 100 days to amend our comp plan and
No.
land use to do that.
No. Inside the county, outside the city, great, knock yourself out.
Right.
It's sponsored by the Republican leader in the Senate.
Yeah.
Who's in a district that is now not very winnable for Republicans, so. I don't know how much opportunity there is in this.
Understood.
I don't understand what the goal is, what benefit is there to the counties to make this decision for cities?
Gives them control over the cities. It helps, I mean, my take would be because generally county commissioners are a different political bent than city councils are. And so it gives that control to the people that share the senator's political ideology.
Do you want to put forward an opposed one?
I'm
Or
not,
just wait?
I think we should hold off, but certainly this isn't opposed, because I'm just on preemption alone. Just on preemption, which we have a policy already that covers that.
Good.
I agree. I don't think it makes sense for one government to be making that decision for another. Just a principle, it just doesn't seem right. And I wouldn't be supportive of a bill for the city to have that power over counties, vice versa. It just doesn't feel right to me.
Okay. We have two related to emergency management. Trevin
Oh.
is going to talk to us about those.
Yeah, so the first one,
2857, just make sure we're all on the same page.
Yes.
2857, that one is, I think I kicked that one over to AC Hadley, and he did some snooping around, and it sounds like that one probably isn't gonna go very far. But in effect, it was worrisome because it was gonna create a new level of emergency management within the state that was gonna have pretty far-reaching powers, even down to the ability of taking some of our resources and putting them towards other places. So wildfires, swooping in, snagging firefighters and taking them off to deal with wildfires and leaving us high and dry. So it was kind of worrisome in the broad powers that that authority was going to have. But AC Hadley pretty much said it doesn't look like it's going to go very far. But if it was to, I think the idea would be for us to at least try and influence it or get a voice on that authority, as it was going to have quite a few members on it making those decisions. And so if we had a seat at that table, it probably wouldn't be quite as worrisome if it was going to go forward. So I think that was kind of the tact on that.
Yeah, I think this is just keep an eye on it for now. I'm not worried about it.
And that's the position that we've been offering, was just to watch. And then do you want to talk about the OEM?
2856, that aligns with the policy statements in supporting the Oregon Resiliency Plan. This would enhance Oregon Emergency Management's capabilities for assisting us with technical issues in the event of a declared disaster emergency. So they'd be able to provide us staff and or expertise when we have an issue going forward. So this would be one that, as it moves forward, potentially we want to support or at least see what that those capabilities were. It would probably also allow us to be able to work towards grants, especially as we transition through our emergency management personnel within the city.
Sounds like a good idea, then. Is everybody okay supporting that? Probably not virtually going anywhere, but
See,
It's a rep.
yeah, exactly. And it's helpful to us, so, yeah.
Okay, and then the last one we have is the Senate Bill 709, which would remove the exemption regarding labor topics from executive sessions. And Kirsten is here if you have any questions about that one.
No, that's just funny. Why is it, why are we? I mean, well, I guess my question is, I'm trying to understand why it's even a bill. Do you know?
Well, I would just reading it's a conservative Republican senator who's sponsoring it, who probably has an agenda about labor negotiations. It's probably inconsistent with the city's interests. And I'm not worried about this bill. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. And if it did, we need to oppose it, in my opinion, because we need to position ourselves to be able to have conversations about labor negotiations.
Couple quick notes, Mr. Mayor. It has a very wide-ranging relating clause.
Yeah,
Public
relates to
meetings.
public meetings.
So, and it got assigned to rules.
So keep an eye on
Which
this
means it
bill.
doesn't die, because rule stays open until they're done. So because of that really general and really broad relating clause and the fact that it's sitting in rules, we'll keep an eye on this. So all of that public stuff will probably come into a package within that committee at some point.
What that means is that towards the end of the session, everything in the text of the bill will go away. So it won't have anything to do with labor relations in executive meetings, and they'll stuff something else that has something to do with public meetings that could be completely unrelated to any of this. So in other words, we need to keep an eye on this and watch for amendments coming through, because this is a classic kind of stuff opportunity.
for this bill, have the unions already vocalized a position on it?
If not
It's just
public,
been-
if not public for sure behind the scenes, I mean, it's something that they obviously will have an issue with. It's Senator Winthrop, as the mayor pointed out. So the realities are, it's probably just going to be used as a placeholder.
Hmm.
And I chuckled when we talked about our meetings, but there's a lot of new legislators, as everybody knows, it's over 30%.
Yeah.
And a lot of those folks, especially staff, doesn't realize that you don't have to run a bill early in session. Those deadlines that are there are deadlines, but there's also other ways around that within the process. And that's gutting stuff, that's amendments, that's jumping onto a bill that's already moving, so that a lot of folks that are new to the legislative process haven't really figured that out yet. But that's also why it's important for us to keep these types of bills on our list and on our tracking, because we know they're gonna be alive, because it's in the rules committee. And we know that it's an opportunity to put something else in there, so
Really noted.
it's, yeah, things really get fun here after all the policy stuff dies off.
Anything else on bills?
No, so just to recap, I think we're taking 2 bills forward to the council for consideration. That would be House Bill 3174 with a support 1. 3174 had to do with the housing grants. And then we are talking about taking House Bill 2856, which has to do with the OEM technical assistance, taking that forward, probably just as support 2, because that's easy enough to write a letter and be in support of. Then you'd ask us to keep an eye on Senate Bill 847, which has a lot. And House Bill 2815 on expediting housing, and House Bill 3217, which has environmental justice in it. And we want to also keep an eye on the gotten stuff we just discussed, Senate Bill 709, which right now has to do with executive sessions and tightening up which topics are covered. For all of those, we'll check in with the league, see what they're doing, and if they have enough horsepower, we'll be well positioned.
Excellent, thank you.
So I have a question is, these are going to go to council. These are in addition to the legislative priorities that council recently approved at last Monday night's meeting, correct?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm new to legislative council, or excuse me, new to legislative committee, so I'll make sure I understand our process. So staff and Justin, you're going to continue to identify potential priority bills for this committee to review. And then it goes through the same process between now and the end of session, essentially.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure I understood. Great.
And Councilor,
I was gonna say, the caveat to that would be that if a bill falls under one of the policy priorities that the council's already approved, we wouldn't necessarily take a specific bill to council for approval because it already falls well within one of those priorities. It's those that maybe might not be within those priorities that we would want to reiterate and take back to council for a double check.
Or that are so egregious.
Yeah, so
That we
much-
want to make it known.
Yeah.
and Mr. Mayor and Councilor, we've already shared these legislative priorities with the Speaker, the Senate President. I will share this with co-chairs. Again, that's why those 2 dates, February 22nd on the first budget forecast, revenue forecast, and May 17th are so important, because we want to make sure that we're on. As the mayor knows, the Speaker keeps great big spreadsheets, so we wanted to make sure that we were on those early.
Are there any other things that we generally follow in the legislature? You know, for example, when the state agencies go and make their pitch for funding, obviously some of those funding requests can have a huge impact on the city. What is our practice for keeping an eye on the state agency funding requests? Do we ever weigh in on that? Can you educate me on that?
We haven't in the past, but what we started this conversation, this session with, was just recognizing that there may be more things of interest than there have typically been. And so we're open to doing that if that's of interest of the legislative committee. And then, you know, of course, we'd have to confirm with the council.
So it becomes a balancing act. And
Oh,
again,
of course.
pardon me for interrupting.
Yeah,
I mean,
please.
we really like, we need to be strategic about how we expend our political capital.
Right.
This will be our first session without our own senator being the Senate president. So we're taking that into account. We're also trying not to dilute that political capital when it comes to what our true priorities are.
Sure.
So obviously, we're keeping an eye on those things, but we do have to weigh that, and we'll bring that discussion in front of this committee.
And as a real world example of that not diluting our priorities, we had to sort of deliver some difficult news to one of our local reps, because their priority bill sort of could potentially jeopardize our priorities, because it's a bill about the city of Salem that would require significant expenditure on the behalf of the state for our project that it's actually not our project and that we're not interested in delivering. That's the streetcar system. So we had to share with the representative that we weren't interested in that bill going forward, because at this time, because we hadn't calculated it into our priorities. We hadn't considered it as part of our of our process, and it was really too late in the game to be adding something that monumental to our priority list.
So what agency,
perception of Salem's support for it could jeopardize the funding for the
Yes.
other priorities that we are putting forward.
Right.
that makes sense. So one agency that comes to mind is Oregon State Hospital. Obviously with all of the early aid and assist releases, that can impact Salem and much more than other cities. Is that something we would be open to at least following carefully? I would at least like to know what's happening with their funding, because that is going to impact, and a lot of residents are concerned, frankly, about what's happening in the state hospital and how that might impact their own neighborhood safety.
So yeah, behavioral health is definitely one of those things that we keep an eye on, and we could potentially weigh in on. We already have a couple of bills, not there. Those funding bills are typically after that May forecast is when the real conversations start on those. Any bill that starts with a 5 zeros, or those are where the big money gets spent. And so yeah, we'll definitely be wanting to pay attention to that and weighing in on that whole aid and assist conversation, because it does impact us so much.
And we have a disproportionate impact.
Right.
Yes.
As the counselor mentioned, so it might fit with our number 3 under some of our policy items. I think it helps strengthen that argument for that priority specifically.
The other thing that we can do is we can leverage our support. We can make it kind of help us in some of our other things if we can get on board with somebody else's priority. And that's where Justin really kind of navigates all of that. Like, hey, it would be really good for us to weigh in here because we need this person's support for this thing, and so he really navigates those political waters well for us.
And then, Mr. Mayor, as long as we're on the line, I did have a conversation yesterday with Representative Anderson's staff about that study. It's now 250. They are going to propose an amendment for 250,000, and that would go through Chariot to do the study.
Yes,
That's what I heard yesterday. I just wanted to report that.
thank you. I've been having a series of conversations with all of those people as well. So yeah, there is a hearing coming up.
I just saw that. Did you see that? Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Anything else that anybody has, counselors?
What would we do in regards to the hearing?
Well, we're trying to walk a fine line because we haven't taken a formal position like where we're coming out opposing that bill at this point. And we prefer to not have to do that, obviously, because we don't want to go against one of our delegation's priority bills publicly. So, but we have made it very well known to him where we are, and we're hoping for a good outcome at the end of the day.
What's the bill number you're referring to?
It's, I don't,
Did he just have a draft?
He has a bill number now.
it's up 2:23 at 5 p.m. is the hearing. But I don't have the.
I've looked at it several times, but I don't remember the number.
It's 3224, I think.
And I think the real key is continuing that dialogue and having that honest conversation with that office. I mean,
Right.
obviously, everybody in the city probably loves to see a streetcar. It's just how do you weigh what's going on with the expense, right? So
It's a really, really, really ambitious streetcar system that goes up and over one of our bridges, down to the hospital, over to the freeway, all over the place.
That was part of the conversation I was having. When you're requesting a study, you don't already have the route planned typically.
Right.
And so it kind of is a little struggling to figure out what the goal is there.
Right. The other challenge with the concept was that they were thinking that they could just hook the streetcar system into the West Line and use those tracks as well, the potential West Line extension, which is the tracks that come down here through Front Park, which.
Different style of rail, correct?
So
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I see we have a hearing scheduled on the 23rd. Are we going to be present, provide testimony, stay out of it?
Trying to stay out.
Stay out of it. Thank you.
Yeah, all right, I think nothing else on the agenda. I think we are adjourned. Thank you, Kelly.